Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
Thanks for joining me once again for my delightful conversation with Bob Sutton, the esteemed organizational psychologist and professor at Stanford's prestigious Engineering School. Now, Bob, we had a lot of fun in the first part of our chat, but I want to make sure we dig into your latest book, The Friction Project: How Smart Leaders Make the Right Things Easier and the Wrong Things Harder. Can you share some examples of how people have overcome friction?
Well, so let's. I'm going to start with two government examples. Everybody likes to complain about government.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah, but I've got actually good examples, and I'll start with a little story in the book, and that we're developing. So I've lived in California since I was 9, except for when I went to school in Michigan. And I've always hated going to the Department of Motor Vehicles because it's such a terrible experience. Okay, terrible.
And it's beige.
It's
beige.
Yeah, yes. By waiting in line, and people are grumpy. Everything takes forever. It's confusing. So this is about 3 years ago. My mother passes away, unfortunately, and my mother had the best life, especially after she was 80. It's a long story. So anyway, I've got to change the registration for her car. And I get there at 7:30 in the morning. And I think I'm going to be there for 3 hours. And I think everybody's going to be grumpy. There's 50 people in line in front of me. It's like, oh, this is going to be a terrible day. This guy at 7:40 walks down the line with forms and talks to each person and does triage. And if they need a form, gives them the form and tells them to fill it out. Some people were told you don't need to stand in line, or you couldn't. Like somebody was there to get a passport, you can't get the DMV. I'm in the office at the right window by 8:02, and I'm out by 8:15, and it was a great customer experience.
Oh, how wonderful!
So since we wrote the book, Huggy and I have talked to the senior executives at the Department of Motor Vehicles, and they've done all this stuff with technology, with culture, with sort of the process flow, with employee training to make things better. So there's a thing, those of us in the United States, we're moving to real ID. Everybody has to get a new identification card. They have moved, and you have to go into the DMV. There has to be what they call a wet signature. They have moved the process from 28 minutes to 8 minutes. And
productivity.
And everybody's in a better mood, and you don't have to go in the DMV as often. So my line, and I said this to both a senior executive at Google and a senior person at Stanford in the last 2 weeks: if the Department of Motor Vehicles can do it, you can do it.
Absolutely.
That's my so that's a good example. And another example, and this is one that just warms my heart, is that in the state of Michigan, there used to be a form if you were somebody who needed assistance from the state of Michigan, if you needed food, if you needed money, if you needed health care. This is for the poor people in the state. You had to fill out a form. 2.5 million people a year in the state of Michigan complete this form. This form had 1,000 questions. It was 42 pages long. And my favorite stupid question was, when was your child conceived? Not when they were born. When was your? I have 3 children. I asked my wife this question, and there's one we might be able to answer. So yeah.
If you're lucky enough to have enough sex, you shouldn't know the answer to that question. Right? I mean, if you don't have enough sex, you should know. But if you're having a lot of sex, you shouldn't know.
You're a woman after my own heart. This is fabulous. So this guy named Michael Brennan, who already was involved in nonprofits in the state of Michigan, he goes on a campaign to fix this form. He starts a nonprofit called Sevilla. He hires some people. He gets a grant. And he worked for 2 years, and he did it the slow, hard. This is one thing about getting rid of friction. If you rush and do it too fast, it doesn't work. So he got the senior, government officials on board. One way he got them on board was he brought the top 8 people from the agency that were responsible for the form and sat them down and asked them to fill out their damn form. Only one of them had ever filled it out, and the top guy couldn't get past page 8. And instead of getting pissed off, he said, oh my God, we've got to do something. and they work with civil servants. They they prototyped it, and they had they had to comply to 1,700 pages of rules and procedures. But 2 years later, there's now a form in the state of Michigan. It's 80% shorter. It takes about half the time to fill out. There's many fewer errors and much quicker processing time. Fewer people visit the offices for help. So the friction in the whole system has been reduced in something that was just like a terrible process. And to me, the reason I like the DMV story, and most of our stories are actually in traditional corporations, things like Microsoft and Salesforce and stuff like that. But in both those stories, and I would go back to it, the state of Michigan can do it, and the DMV can do it. Well, then Google, which has got serious friction problems right now, serious. They are one of the most screwed up companies I know in terms of having friction problems. And this is no secret. I mean, and it's well documented that if the government can do it, Google can do it.
Absolutely. And it really is about simplification. Both of those themes were about simplification.
Yes.
And also looking at your customers and the customer experience.
Yes. So to me, that's the beauty of the journey. And then, moving into companies. So one of the companies we did a case study of was AstraZeneca, and they led this movement that, at least according to them, a simplification movement that cut out 2 million hours of employee time. And by the way, their goals to cut out employee time was not to do layoffs or not so much to make people more efficient, but to free up time so people could do the hard stuff in life, like develop better drugs, things like that, serve customers better. But one of the things they figured out when they did this sort of process thing is onboarding in the company was really frustrating. Very often it would take 2, 3, 4 weeks before people had a working laptop with all the software and everything. And that's a really bad introduction to a company. So they came up with sort of standardized procedures and also sort of hard guidelines about if you as a leader don't have people onboarded within 2 days, you're going to get dinged on your performance evaluation. Which I think
you should.
As you should.
As you should. Because, some of the things I write about in my 2 books, I'm a baby author compared to your big old author thing. So
I'm older.
just I'll catch you. But so I wrote 2 books, Solve the People Puzzle, and my most recent book, Dare to Care in the Workplace. And a lot of it is about the employee experience.
Yes.
Right. And so onboarding, companies over-engineer, and I know you're in the engineering school, but they over-engineer how to welcome people into their company to the point where it's such a shitty experience that by the time they finish their first 30, 60, 90 days, they have, what have I done? What company have I joined? So this focus we're really working on, my company, the work I do, the speeches I give, is all about the employee experience. So tell me a little bit about this friction concept and the employee experience and your point of view there.
Well, I think that this example that we just talked about of making onboarding simple, but one that we've done quite a bit of work on is actually meetings. So
death by meeting.
Death by meeting. We all hate meetings. Blah blah blah. So there's a woman. Her name's Rebecca Hines. She started working with us about 10 or 11 years ago. She actually did a lot of the editing on Scaling Up Excellence when she was 21 or 22. She was better than our so-called professional editor, and eventually she got a PhD in our program. And she runs something called the Work Innovation Lab at Asana. Asana is a software company. And she's great. And so we did, and she did most of the work, and she led it. We did an effort called the meeting reset methodology. And eventually what we had is we had 60 Asana employees, and they went through their standing meetings and they evaluated each meeting that they had on how important it was and how much work it was. And actually for 30 of them, what they did is a kind of a thought experiment. They removed all standing meetings from their calendar for 4 to 8 hours and then put them back in. So that was sort of a subtraction. And then Rebecca in particular gave them some advice about, well, what can we do about these meetings, especially the low value meetings that are a lot of work? Those are the worst. And so essentially, after especially she ran the numbers, people went through a subtraction exercise, and the average person saved 4 hours a month. So that's pretty good. One woman, Francesca in London, saved 32 hours a month. Her life was like a shit show in some ways. But so anyway, so I mean, that's one of those sort of things that we do, I think, that does improve the employee experience. And some of the most interesting conversations that people had in that case was the situation where, somebody's invited to a meeting all the time, and you think that if you tell them, please don't go to the meeting, we really don't need you, they're going to feel bad. So Rebecca said most of the time people said, oh, thank goodness, it's a gift from the heavens. So that's also changing the norms of the company about being careful who you invite to meetings. And also, if you're invited to a meeting and it's not useful to be there, to have permission and even be encouraged to say, I'm sorry, there's no reason for me to be there. I'm not going to help you. Let me use my time for something else. So that would be an example of just a little thing to improve employee experience, of the kind of thing that we've done and we've worked on it. And you could go, the Asana meeting reset playbook is online. Anybody in your audience can go find it and use it.
That's great. That's a great tool, because really, there's about 3 million more jobs than there are people right now out there that want to work.
Wow.
So a lot of companies, that's across the U.S., and a lot of companies are struggling to get people to work for them. And they're fighting about hybrid work or remote work or on-site work. I mean, there's all this, fighting and friction, right? About how do we work and how do we establish good relationships between employers and employees. And part of the concepts you're talking about is being honest, being open, giving people permission to not attend if they don't think it's worth the time. So talk a little bit more about that. So I'm an employee at Meta, or I'm an employee at a little growing company, like $5 million companies that are going to become $50 million companies. How should I, the employee, assert myself to reduce friction?
Ooh. So I love that question. And one reason I love that question is that it's really easy to fall into the trap of, well, that's senior management's job and I can't do anything about it. That's a trap. And I do think that in the best organizations and in the best cultures, first of all, it's not an orphan problem. Everybody views it as their job to make the right things easy and if you will, the wrong things hard, which are sort of our subtitle. But that's it. But also there is permission and understanding that we are all responsible, and that's what I liked about the Asana subtraction exercise, is everybody viewed it as their responsibility, and yes, and the way that we describe it in the book is we talk about this concept of the cone of friction. That if you're the CEO of a big company, then you probably have a bigger cone of friction, because and that's one of our definition of like the more senior an executive is, the more capability they have to waste other people's time. But all of us can have a little bit of a cone of friction. So the example that I gave of the Department of Motor Vehicles employee who took it upon himself to reduce the burden on the 60 of us online. That was his cone of friction. And then in terms of thinking about the number of emails you send, the number of meetings you call, one of our favorite things in the modern workplace, and something that actually Rebecca Hines from Asana and I are also working on, and a guy named Paul Leonardi from the University of California, Santa Barbara, is the problem of sort of the number of different apps or software applications that we all use in companies. And I don't know about where you work, but at Stanford, everybody who has a credit card can buy almost anything that they want, and then force us all to use Salesforce or Asana, which I've just mentioned, and so you end up having like this huge sort of tech stack. I remember watching she now lives in Colorado too, my 28-year-old daughter Eve, when she started as a customer service person. That was her first job out of college. So she on her little 13-inch laptop, she had about 22 apps open at once, and she just the amazing thing is she could do it. And then I had her go down the stack, and essentially everybody in her company added a different app and required her to use it. And so this problem of how you stop the proliferation of apps, that would be another thing that if you add a new app, realize that you are imposing a tax on all of your colleagues and your customers too.
And you're not simplifying the process, and you're not subtracting distraction from the process. Oh my God, I have to open this to do this.
Yes.
That to do that. This, I've got HubSpot, I've got, Asana over here, I've got this over here, on this project I have to work over here. It's a time suck.
Yeah, so the thing I like about your question is this digital exhaustion that we all face. We all might be victims, but we're also part of the solution. And I'll give you examples. This is about 2 months ago. So one of the great things I like about technology, it's really nice to not to have to travel to give a speech. I was just sitting here talking to, and I had 400 vice presidents from a large software company that I won't name. And I had them do this thing. This is in the book, another one of our tools called the subtraction game. And I've done this with as many as 2,000 people. You turn to the person next to you and say, what, if you get rid of one bad thing in your company, what would you get rid of? And the thing that was at the top of this company was too many Slack messages, too many irrelevant Slack messages, and too many long Slack messages. Okay. And that was the most frequent one. And I could see that. And then I asked them, I said, so who sends those Slack messages? It's you. So,
exactly.
So to me, that's an example of, rather than pointing at people at others.
It's kind of like this.
Yeah. So, and we're talking about accountability. So can we talk about love?
Of course we can. Absolutely.
That was the one thing I wanted to make sure to talk about with you was love, given your work.
Okay, all we need is love. Dun, 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 dun. So what do you want to talk about? Go for love.
Well, there's two, just love and friction. There's two little kinds of stories that I think are relevant. One is about good friction. The other one's about bad friction. In terms of sort of like the good friction, so we're in this sort of era of sort of like instant relationships, and things like flash teams that we build things sort of right away. And the Supremes, the song "You Can't Hurry Love." So if you sort of look at the most effective teams and relationships in the business, in the workplace, they really take a long time to develop. And they even have this term, prior joint experience. So if you really want a really great team, taking the time to develop it is really important. And I'll give you an example of two amazing Stanford students, Greta Meyer and Amanda Calabrese. They have you talk about the $5 million startup. It's exactly what they got.
Excellent. Congratulations.
They are reinventing. They have reinvented the modern tampon. It's called Sequel. You can buy it on the market. It's just now in the marketplace. They just got
God,
FDA.
I don't need them anymore. But good for them.
Good for that.
Where the hell were they when I needed them?
but talk about a big market, huh? I mean,
huge.
That's and I just got a note from Greta, which is like we reinvented the product for the first time in 80 years. I mean, but the two of them, Greta and Amanda, they went through the hell of taking every entrepreneurship class at Stanford and working on their relationship and actually just being beat up in the process to develop their product, to develop their marketing stuff. And so they got their $5 million in venture capital. They just got FDA approval. Unlike Elizabeth Holmes, they finished their Stanford degrees, so they're not dropouts. So that's an example of you can't hurry love and develop this sort of really strong relationship between these two women that are keeping this little company going. And then the other part, and this gets to your customer service stuff, probably my favorite person who we interviewed during the course of our research for the book. This guy's name is Todd Park. What Todd Park is probably most famous for is he worked at the Obama administration as CTO. And when the Obamacare website came out, it was terrible. It would take 8 seconds in between clicks. So he led the effort to fix that. And he brought together kind of government bureaucrats and hotshots from Silicon Valley and got them, even though they initially hated each other, got them to work together and to fix the problem. Okay, now he's got a startup with his brother Ed. This is not a small startup. They are in, I just looked yesterday, 13 states. And the idea is you're 65 or older and you're kind of dealing with the healthcare system, Medicare, whatever insurance you have, your dentist, over-the-counter products and everything. And so how do you get the services together in sort of one-stop shopping, one point of contact? And the concept, and I said, and Ed is great logistically. Actually, he and his brother, Ed, sold a company called Athena Health for like hundreds of millions of dollars in the software business. So they know software and stuff. And he said, so for us, it's love and logistics. But yes, we have the whole systems to make the logistics work, and it's one-stop shopping. But our concept is that if you work for us and you have a patient or a client on the phone, that you think of them, you treat them just like your mother or father, just like somebody you love. And he said, if we start with that's our design principle is our constraint, how would we treat them emotionally? And what kind of experience in healthcare would they get in the process? And he's so charismatic. It's like one of those people. Todd Park's just sort of like remarkable. But to me, and there's an academic research there's a wonderful woman, Sagal Barsad, who passed away a couple of years ago, young from cancer, and she did research on companionate love, called companionate love. So this is sort of like non-sexual or platonic love that people have in the workplace. And she's got all sorts of evidence that when that happens in workplaces, well, people not only have better mental and physical health, they also are more productive and more creative because of all the trust and psychological safety that goes with it. So for us, love is sometimes, in terms of the friction, you got to slow down. Long-term relationships are not easy, and they take a long-term time to develop. And then sometimes, the most love you can show to people is to create an experience where they don't suffer and don't go through a terrible ordeal. So that's one of our antidotes to friction troubles is love in the right places.
Oh, and I totally agree with you. Faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. I had a wonderful experience in 2020, like in the middle of the whole craziness that happened. My team stayed together. We lost, everything went to hell in a handbasket, just like everybody else did. And when we were coming out of it, my team surprised me with a love letter.
Oh!
It was the most beautiful moment of my career, and continues to be. So I think, this leading with love and less friction. And if we could just all adopt that mentality and meet people where they need to be met, make sure they know they matter greatly to us. Like, your time is precious, my time is too, and I love that you've spent time with me. It's a gift. People's time is a gift, and it's a little piece of love.
Yeah, I like that. And just if that language makes people uncomfortable, caring is just about as good. It's a
cousin. It's a kissing cousin to love. Care.
If you care and have compassion for people, sometimes that's enough. But that's the thing that sort of shocked me is the first time I talked to this guy Todd Park, I thought he was a hardcore software executive, and he's a CEO, and then he got this guy talking about love. It's like, who the hell are you? And then he talked about software and logistics a lot. So.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, I could really talk to you forever, and maybe we'll just talk again sometime about another book. But can you tell people how to find you, and how do they get you to speak to their organizations? Tell us how they'll find you.
Oh, well, so I'm at bobsutton.net, and I actually love, people can just see, I have a speakers bureau and everything, and it's on my site, bobsutton.net. But my perspective is that if you just send me an email, I like getting weird, strange emails. It's great if you want to hire me for a speech, but if you want to tell me a story about friction, or I still get, for better or worse, in 2007, I wrote a book called The No Asshole Rule. And I I still get 2 or 3 emails a week about asshole bosses and stuff. I kind of like those too. So you can write me at bobsut@stanford.edu. So it's not like I'm hiding my email. So.
No, that's great. And before you go, I wanted to ask you, Bob, how did the no asshole rule come about in the first place?
Well, first of all, in 2007, I wrote a book, my shortest book. And by the way, since you've done a book, no blurbs. Nobody would blurb it because it had a dirty title. So we said, and all my books have all, the greatest thing ever, no blurbs. It sold almost 1 million copies worldwide. So 140 or 50,000 copies in Italy, in Italian. that's when I went to Italy, and they're serious about the asshole problem there. So that's the book, The No Asshole Rule. It still sells 20,000 copies a year, so it's not like people aren't buying it. And so we were talking about McKinsey, and the one partner I know who was kind of funny, he retired, Lenny Mendonça. I did speaking gigs there 2 or 3 times a year to senior executives, and used to always introduce me as like a serious introduction. He'd say, but no matter what he does, Bob Sutton will always be known as the asshole guy. So that's I'm the asshole guy pretending to write about friction or scaling or something.
So how do we define who an asshole is?
Academics have 2 different ways there's a huge literature on abusive workplaces, bullying, huge. And there's 2 general approaches. One approach is list the behaviors. Do they insult you? Do they ignore you? Do they gossip about you nastily behind your back? Do they scream at you? So there's a guy named Bennett Tepper I think it's at Ohio State who's been studying workplace bullying, abusive supervision for years. That's one approach. And I do steal some of their stuff. But the thing that I tend to focus on is you have an asshole problem if you think that somebody in your workplace leaves you feeling demeaned and de-energized. They could be a temporary asshole. They might just do it once. We are all temporary assholes. I would raise my hand. And the ones who do it consistently are certified assholes. So it's how do you feel after you talk to them or interact with them? And that's where I say that asshole. And then I've learned when I do that to people, and I do that to people every now and then, I have to raise my hand and say, I have been an asshole. I'm sorry. I actually said this to my nephew over Christmas. I said something to him I shouldn't have said. Oh, sorry, I'm an asshole. I didn't mean to say that.
I think it's great that we all have moments, right, where we just don't show our best self.
No.
We have to raise our hand and say, well, that was me being an asshole.
That's me.
And we're perfectly imperfect, and that's what this is all about.
And that's one of my lines is assholes are us. Like we're all capable.
Like Toys R Us.
Psychologists are brilliant about designing situations that turn almost everybody into a jerk. You put people in a hurry. You haven't been around somebody who's insulting. Sleep deprivation is a great way to turn people into jerks too. It's really reliable.
I need 8 hours a night, Bob. Thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for daring to care in the workplace.
Oh, I love how you dare to care. It's so wonderful to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And thank you for listening to another episode. Please make sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Until we meet again.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.